Back in the summer, I reviewed the first trilogy of Big Finish's new Dark Gallifrey set, which are basically going to be a trilogy of stories that follow different Time Lords, rogue Time Lords specifically, or evil Time Lords, in this big Dark Gallifrey saga that's going to be years long and comprise of 8 trilogies at time of this recording. And while I did enjoy Tim Foley's Morbius trilogy from the Dark Gallifrey set, I reviewed those as 3 individual installments, as 3 individual reviews, and honestly I thought that was kind of underselling the big epic that was the Morbius Dark Gallifrey trilogy, which is very much this like Dracula Captain's Log epic journey, the voyage of the last voyage of the Demeter type odyssey, that is a big story arc about Morbius being revived by his cult members in order to try and find and take over the mysterious Dark Gallifrey. And we're going to be learning more about Dark Gallifrey and what it is and the legends and what it's basically what its role in the universe is over the course of these, like I said, 8 trilogies, which are going to conclude and culminate in September 2027. So please set your calendars for those dates. But the next trilogy is Dark Gallifrey, the War Master, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just review this as one big trilogy in one video, in one live stream, because like I said, I felt it was kind of underselling it. It was basically one big story, so reviewing it over the course of 3 months, I think kind of did the story itself a bit of a disservice, and also the reviews themselves might not have been as good as they could have been, because maybe I was forgetting some details from like 2 months prior that really would have informed part 3, for example. But for Dark Gallifrey, the War Master, you've got this trilogy of stories written by James Goss, which primarily revolves around not the War Master, but Bernie Summerfield, who is travelling with the Unbound Doctor, who is an alternate universe Doctor played by the late great David Warner. And Bernie Summerfield and the Unbound Doctor have been having Big Finish adventures for about 7 or 8 years now, and David Warner passed away, of course, so this might be his final ever appearance for Big Finish as the Unbound Doctor. He had an appearance in last year's Once and Future Anniversary special, where he had a multi-Doctor team-up story with Christopher Eccleston as the Ninth Doctor, which was really cool to see, even if the story itself I don't really think was that engaging. But for this is not so much a War Master story as it is a Bernie Summerfield trilogy. And Dark Gallifrey, the War Master Part 1 does not feature the War Master in any capacity. It's kind of a strange way to frame this from a marketing and promotional and like title structural like sense. It's a strange one, and not just because of that aspect of it, but also because of the formatting of this installment of Dark Gallifrey, because the War Master Part 1 is a story that is told non-linearly. The War Master Part 1 begins with the end of the story, with Bernie Summerfield and the Unbound Doctor essentially escaping Dark Gallifrey, and then we flip to different areas in the conventional 60-minute episode, and then it's just told non-linearly. Disconnected scenes back to back to back from different points in the adventure. So you'll have a scene when Bernice and the Doctor are trying to escape this creature called the Abomination, who's the big villain of this trilogy, and then you'll go to another clip where it is the Unbound Doctor trying to negotiate with the Time Lords of Dark Gallifrey in the Citadel, trying to talk them out of unleashing the Abomination, and then you'll cut to another scene where Bernie Summerfield is inside of a TARDIS, voiced by Homer Toddywaller, and then it would just cut back and forth, which makes it a little bit of an impregnable listen at first, because it doesn't really forecast this up front, so you just kind of figure it out as the episode is going along. But to just give you folks a sense of what I'm on about, here's a clip from Dark Gallifrey, the War Master Part 1.
What you see as manipulation is actually just how we see time. We take a non-linear, holistic view that's impossible to explain to others, just as an ant can't read the newspaper it's crawling across.
Ha!
I bow to your superior argument, Bertrand Russell.
If ha wasn't good enough for you, what about pa?
I did what I had to.
You changed my entire life.
I did what had to be done for the greater good of the universe.
Ha and pa.
Someday you'll thank me.
Is that omniscience or wishful thinking?
I've got the only TARDIS left on this Gallifrey, so maybe just agree with me.
No, Doctor. What you did was cruel. You played on my...
Hubris?
Don't list people's faults on a high walkway. You played on my pride. I just wanted to make one discovery. Something that people would remember. Because you wanted to know if this version of Gallifrey could be found. All the time you were telling me not to, you were egging me on.
I wanted to see what would happen, and I knew you'd be safe from the abomination.
Which is why we're currently running from it across a collapsing planet.
Details again. The ant can only see the squiggly lines, not the argument.
Doctor?
Yes. You see my point, Summerfield?
No!
Oh! Ow! Ow!
I'm scared of you.
Oh, come on now.
I'm really scared. I can see what you're going to do next.
Come on. We're having a brilliant time and we're saving the day.
I'm still scared. This isn't the end of it, you know. You're going to leave me to die without a backward look.
Now I understand why TARDISes don't speak.
Because if we did, we'd scream.
So yeah, hopefully that clip gives you a sense of just how the format and the structure of the War Master Part 1, it goes from like set piece to set piece non-linearly. And the reason I think it doesn't work is because we're not just like, if you listen to the full hour, you couldn't just cut out all of those scenes and then put them in the semblance of like a right order or a correct order, and then you have a conventional 60-minute story. No, there's massive gaps in the story as well. It almost feels like the non-linear formatting was more of an excuse so that the episode doesn't ever have to really explain itself. And when you are listening to the behind the scenes interviews as well, where you've got James Goss talking with the script editor Scott Handcock, and also the producer, who's also the producer of this range as well, he mentions that the War Master is meant to be like the epilogue of the Dark Gallifrey series, which I reminded you folks earlier is comprised of 8 trilogies, and apparently the War Master is meant to be the final chapter of that in terms of the actual timeline of it, even though it's the second one being released. So you have this non-linear story with a lot of these gaps missing, and also not a lot of interesting character work going on here, because you heard in the clip there, Bernice Summerfield is upset that she really wanted to discover something with her name on it. She really wanted to find Dark Gallifrey, and the Doctor's like, some doors should never be open, Bernice. But apart from that, there's very little actual interesting character work going on in this installment, and the fact that it's also told non-linearly, but also has a lot of big gaps missing, means that there's not a lot to really invest in, which is a bit disappointing. There's some interesting weird Time Lord lore going on here with Dark Gallifrey, but because this is meant to be an epilogue chapter, it means that we're missing so much background and so much information that might have informed the story. And also the fact that this is a War Master story that doesn't have the War Master in it at all. It's it's a strange way to open it. I will say though, that over the course of this trilogy, this could be the final appearance of David Warner as the Unbound Doctor, and the note that he leaves, the final note that he leaves on in this trilogy, is a really nice and really sweet one. There's not much in the way of character or dynamics or anything interesting in terms of like the actual material or what you know, there's not a lot here for him to do, unfortunately. But it does end on a nice note at least. There's also a really nice behind the scenes interview clip with David Warner where he's talking about what he brings to the character from his perspective of the Unbound Doctor, and I thought it was really interesting. Here's a quick clip.
I have to, I'm always honest in these kind of talks with Big Finish and Doctor Who, that I haven't been able to follow the whole canon of Doctor Who for the whole, since Hartnell to now. So, people sometimes ask me what's my take on the Doctor. The take is the script, and that's what I try and do. And I hope that when you said it, people like it, which is great.
Yeah, same, David, same. I've not been able to follow the canon of Doctor Who since Hartnell either. I've never related to a Doctor actor so much in my entire life. It was a bit of a disappointing opening chapter. There's just not a lot to it. There's just not a lot going on, unfortunately, other than the non-linear structure. And that doesn't really do anything to benefit the story, other than it kind of feels like James Goss kind of showing off a bit. but he's showing off a story that's not particularly interesting. I don't know. Let's move on to part 2, because this is where it kind of feels like the story is actually gaining momentum here. Dark Gallifrey, the War Master Part 2, which has Bernice Summerfield after having escaped from Dark Gallifrey with the Unbound Doctor. She is now teaching at a university, and one of her students is Captain John Hart, played by James Masters. You've also got a university professor here, played by Derek Jacobi. Of course, it's the War Master in disguise, because these two are both trying to find Dark Gallifrey for their own nefarious reasons, and they've taken very different approaches here. The War Master is trying to befriend Bernice to lull her into a false sense of security, to maybe hypnotise the answers of Dark Gallifrey out of her, and Captain John Hart is trying to seduce Bernice Summerfield in order to lull her into a false sense of security in order to find out where Dark Gallifrey is. Let's play a clip from Dark Gallifrey, The War Master, Part 2.
Look, I'm sorry about what I said. I don't know how it got into my mind.
I'm not a fan. I'm not fishing for scandal. I like you.
You can fish for scandal a bit if you like.
Really?
The Temperons have terrible breath.
No.
A Temperon choir could melt a wall.
Blimey.
Yep.
There was an odd thing in the book.
No doubt it was wrong. Unauthorised stuff normally is. Oh, you should see my Galactopedia entry, mostly written by my enemies.
Yeah, I mean, what even is Dark Gallifrey?
I could see you talking from my window, Professor.
Spying on me now, Provost?
Not at all. But is it really an appropriate relationship?
Well,
You must do as you please, but I am a little hurt at how you brought this matter to me.
you're hurt?
And then ignored my kindly offered advice.
I'm not ignoring your advice.
You sat eating your lunch together.
And the young man has not even seen a flash of my ankles.
Well then, but still, this discourse pains me.
I've done nothing wrong, nor has he.
I'm delighted to hear it. Let's ignore my hurt feelings and consider the matter closed.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that would be a start.
As people in the chat have pointed out, this is like Captain John Hart's second ever appearance for Big Finish. Or like he's not had many. Let's just James Masters for Big Finish. Let's have a look. So this is like his third ever appearance for Big Finish. He's done The Death of Captain Jack, which is meant to be really good, and also The Sins of Captain John. So he's done 2 previous Torchwood installments for Big Finish before, and then they just drop him in the middle of this Dark Gallifrey War Master thing. And honestly, James Masters is fun. I'm not particularly attached to the character of Captain John Hart. I've not watched Series 2 of Torchwood in like any sort of like in-depth capacity since it initially broadcast, so I'm not really going to claim to be a Captain John Hart expert here. I'm really wondering what on earth he's doing here. I'm trying to pair him up with the War Master as like a comparable threat or a comparable villain to try and like, you know, the stakes are equally bad here. If John Hart gets to Dark Gallifrey, it'll just be equally as bad as if the War Master goes to Dark Gallifrey. Honestly, it felt like I was looking at the audio equivalent of the hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby meme. It's like, of course John Hart's not on the same level as the War Master. Are you kidding me here? What on earth is happening? And then I realised, was this meant to be a Captain Jack Harkness story? Like, did they just hastily, like, replace Captain Jack with Captain John, like, over the course of the production of this because of what happened with John Barrowman and Big Finish cutting ties? Like, is that what... I don't know. I have no, like, insider information to substantiate that, but that's my prevailing theory, because I don't really know what John Hart's doing here. Anyway, he's still a fun presence, but it's weird that in the middle of this Dark Gallifrey trilogy, you've essentially got this like weird like thruple dynamic where John Hart's trying to like seduce Bernice Summerfield. Bernice Summerfield is trying to confide in the Provost, who is actually the War Master of this university, and then they both just go to Dark Gallifrey, and then the part 3 happens. It's a really strange opening chapter to the story, and I say opening chapter because you could essentially like not watch part 1 and you don't really lose anything. Because like I said, not much really happened on a character level in part 1, so all you need to know is, like, for the purposes of part 2, Bernie Summerfield and the Unbound Doctor went to Dark Gallifrey and then escaped, and hopefully they closed the door on the way out, but they forgot to. In fact, I don't actually think you learn, like, why John Hart or the War Master want to be on Dark Gallifrey. It's basically, we are 2 installments into this trilogy, and it feels like 2 hours of busy work. There's not a lot going on. It's very strange. And then you get to part 3, which, despite Bernie Summerfield being on the cover, I genuinely don't even think she's in this story. I don't recall her recording original dialogue in this story. I think that she's in the recap at the beginning, but that's kind of it. And then for the War Master part 3, the War Master and John Hart are on Dark Gallifrey. The Abomination, who's the big villain of the trilogy, is trying to kill them. The War Master's trying to escape inside of the cowardly TARDIS, voiced by Homer Toddywaller. There's some fun dynamic there, I guess. And then John Hart does some weird timey-wimey stuff. I don't know what he's doing here. Oh, and also the War Doctor's here for some reason. Let's play a clip.
There you are. Lovely spot for a nap. Can't say I blame you. I miss naps.
The meadow.
It's improved, hasn't it? Let me guess. Tidied up a bit?
Yes, but
Meadows do that. Tidy themselves up while we sleep.
have you just come here to be whimsical?
If I'd known you were going to be insulting, I wouldn't have woken you. This is a meadow among many meadows. Before the Time Lords, Gallifrey was all meadows, stretching out in every direction.
Seriously? Full of hobbits?
If you like, yes. It was not a paradise, but it didn't have to be. It didn't need to try. And then the Time Lords came and everything dried up. The meadows, the people.
Are you saying that... What is this place?
This is what Gallifrey was. And what it could be again.
So that clip doesn't really explain much, because when you're dealing with, like, Dark Gallifrey, which, like I said, this is meant to be a trilogy that takes place at the end of the Dark Gallifrey series, but for some reason they've released it second. So when it comes to, like, the specifics of what Dark Gallifrey is, how Dark Gallifrey works, or exactly what the War Master and John Hart want to do with Dark Gallifrey, none of that's really explained. So I can't get angry at Dark Gallifrey. I'm just more like listening to it so passively because there's not anything to get invested in. Even the War Doctor who you hear in that clip is like, it's kind of ambiguous as to whether or not he's like just a spectre, if he's like a memory of an echo of a paradox or words to that effect. Like it's kind of like I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what the stakes are because I don't even really know what state Dark Gallifrey is actually in. Like, are they trying to bring it back? Is it mostly empty, or does it... I don't know what's going on here. It's really strange. I don't even know why the main villain, the War Master, wants Dark Gallifrey, other than I want to rule it because it's Dark Gallifrey. Of course, I don't know what's going on here. I can't get invested. There's nothing to really get invested in, other than like a cute little subplot with the cowardly TARDIS. And that's kind of it. Like, it's kind of a bit of a red flag, I think, with the interviews for the box sets as well, when you've got both Jonathan Carley, who plays the War Doctor, and you've got Derek Jacobi, who plays the War Master. Both of them are saying that they were kind of struggling with the material. Like, they didn't quite know how to play it. They didn't quite know, like, how to approach the dialogue and the characterization. And of course, these are very respectful actors who do a really good job in this set, but like the fact that they vocalize that in the interviews, and they don't normally say stuff like that in interviews for Big Finish, kind of suggests that there might be some deeper issues here in terms of what are we doing? I don't understand how we have a first installment that's meant to be this sort of non-linear story with Bernie Summerfield and the Unbound Doctor. The second one is this weird mismatched comedy sitcom to an extent. and then all of a sudden this third one wants to get all abstract and it wants to say that this is a Bernie Summerfield story. Lisa Bowerman's got top billing. I genuinely don't think she recorded anything original for this. Or at least she recorded anything that actually wound up in this episode. It's a strange one. I'm not angry at it. I'm just kind of baffled that it got released in this type of form. And I don't think I'll even think about this trilogy again until I do my 2024 retrospective, and then I have to watch this video back, and then after that, I will never think about this trilogy again. There's nothing here. Like, you've got this really great cast, and there's just nothing here. I don't get it.